Hello and welcome to my channel. My name's Tara, and before we get into it, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Today I'm going to be talking about my top 10 quarantine horror movies. I am going to be spoiling the plots for most of these films, or probably all of them, so I recommend if you haven't seen these films to watch them before you watch this video. And let's just dive right in. The first film I'm going to be talking about is the 2020 Taiwanese film Platform. It's directed by Galder Gratzel Urita. I think that's how you say his name. And the plot synopsis is, in the future, prisoners housed in vertical cells watch as inmates in upper cells are fed while those below starve. I thought this was an interesting film. It was something that kind of hadn't been approached before. It had a lot of commentary about the prison industrial complex. It also had a really interesting dynamic with the main character and how he grew throughout the film, and kind of how you watch his morality and his idea of right and wrong and how you should conduct yourself change really dramatically throughout this film. And I thought it was good for this time period just because right now it's kind of a time where we're all in our houses, and it was about that idea of confinement, of about not being able to leave, and I really liked that. What I'm going to talk about is the 2000 film Record, or R.E.C. This is a Mexican film written by Jamie Balaguerro and Paco Plaza. And the plot of the film is a late night TV host, Angela, and her cinematographer are following the fire service on a call to an apartment building. But the Spanish police seal off the building after an old woman is infected by a virus which gives her inhuman strength. This film's good. It's from 2007, and it kind of shows. The graphics are alright, they kind of hold up. I mean, the gore, the blood, it's alright. I really liked the main character in this film. I thought she was really strong. I thought she showed a lot of good decision making. She fell into a lot of the final girl tropes that we see in films, but not as much as she could. I heavily prefer this to the American version Quarantine, which is still a good film, but I didn't like the characters in that quite as much as I liked the main actress in Record. And I chose it for this list because they get put under quarantine. They're in an apartment building. I live in an apartment building. I'm under quarantine. It felt relevant. So the next movie on the list is The Others. This film was made in 2001 by Alejandro Amenbar, I think that's how you say his name. Forgive me on these pronunciations. So the plot of this film is Grace, the devoutly religious mother of Annie and Nicholas, moves her family to the English coast during World War II. She waits word on her missing husband while protecting her children, who have a rare photosensitivity disease that causes the sun to harm them. Annie claims she sees ghosts. Grace initially thinks the new servants are playing tricks, but chilling events and visions make her believe something supernatural has occurred. So this film is a film I've known for a long time. I saw it for the first time probably in 2003, so it was fairly new. And it's a really good one. It's very mysterious. It's very dark. It has a very specific kind of ambiance to it. It's very mystery driven. It's less of a horror film and more of a mystery. And the twist at the end is absolutely killer. I loved it. I love it every time. It's just such a spooky movie that gets you into such just a ghosty, spooky mood. It's super fun. The bride scene, if you've seen it, you know the bride scene with the little girl is great. Absolutely terrified me when I was a kid. I really recommend this movie. I chose it because, I don't know, it's an oldie, it's a goodie. It's not that old, but it's good. The next film I chose for this list is the 2019 film Await Further Instructions. And I believe this film is still on Netflix. That's where I watched it. And I think it might be a Netflix film. I don't remember right now. The film was written by Johnny Kevorkian, which, cool last name. And the synopsis of the film is, on Christmas Day, a family wakes up to find a mysterious black substance is surrounding their house, and its TV screen broadcasts a single message: stay indoors and await further instructions. This film was great. It's super fun. It's a totally different look on like this whole idea of being quarantined and stuck inside, and it really plays with the idea of like, what will people do when the government tells them it's okay? Like, how far will you go when your elected officials, when you, who you think are your elected officials, because in this film, if you've seen it clearly, it's not that. Or maybe it is. It's never, it's, you, it leaves it on kind of a cliffhanger. There's some uncertainty in this film. But it plays with this idea of how far will you go if you think you're being given permission. And the dynamics between the characters are really great, really stressed, they're really tense. It's, you know, the son has come home for Christmas and he's brought his wife, I think, fiance, wife, girlfriend. He brought his significant other, and his parents are racist towards her, and it's just this whole character drama inside of this film. It plays with power dynamics and masculinity, and it's just a very interesting exploration of what people can do to each other when we're confined in these situations and we can't look past our own power roles and dynamics. Next one on my list is Crazy Eights. And this film came out in 2006. It's by James K. Jones, and it is part of the 8 Films to Die For collection. So if you've heard of that, it is part of that collection of films. I think there's 3 installments of the 8 Films to Die For collections now, but this is part of the original collection from the first go-round. It's, did I say what year it came out? It came out in 2006 if I didn't. And the plot summary is: 6 friends gather for the funeral of a childhood friend who has left behind a will asking them to dig up an old time capsule. They excavate the container and are shocked to find a young girl's skeleton inside. Unnerved, the friends get lost and end up in a long-abandoned government facility where sadistic medical experiments were once performed on children, and they're now trapped and at the mercy of a vengeful ghost. And this film is available currently on Tubi, which is a free app. So if you wanted to go out and watch it, it's kind of hard to find some. I was a little bit surprised that it was available there, but it is. They're pretty good about having obscure kind of films. I love this film. This one's great. It's super interesting. It's not really related to anything going on right now. It's just a fun one that I really like. It has super like creepy southern vibes in it, which I love films that can pull off like scary South kind of, you know, that kind of mood. I really appreciate that. So they did a good job of that in this. They did a good job with the idea of like the government and, you know, this like vaguely like threatening idea of like, are they experimenting on us? Could they be? Have they? I mean, there's a lot. So there's 7 videos to get into with that, but it plays on some of those like kind of fears of like the idea of memory loss and like repressing trauma, and it's just a super solid film. It's pretty low budget. I mean, the effects aren't great, the acting isn't the best you'll ever see, but it's a pretty interesting film altogether. I think it warrants a watch. The next film I'll be talking about is Would You Rather, which came out in 2012 by David Guy Levy. Well, it was directed by David Guy Levy. And the plot of this film is Iris and 7 other desperate people become trapped in a rich man Shepard's mansion. Shepard forces them to play a sadistic game for a large sum of money, but the demands become increasingly deadlier. This film is great. This film packs a punch. It's a crazy ride. Oh, god damn it, demonetized. It's a crazy ride from the beginning to the end. It's great. It whips you through a lot. It's, if you're a fan of Trapped Ashes or Saw or 13 Sins or Circle or Cube or Hellraiser, maybe not so much Hellraiser, but like those kinds of films, it's that type of atmosphere, Or maybe what's a more recent example would be like Truth or Dare. It's that kind of an idea. It's like a game show type horror film. And it was good. The motivation for the main character was really good. I really connected with her. She was trying to get money for her sick little brother. And the twist at the end, should I ruin it? I'm not going to ruin it. Is so good, so crazy, so heartbreaking. You never expect it. It just leaves you like, all of that for nothing? What? So that one is super solid, super good. Next, I have a more recent film, Mom and Dad. This film came out in 2017, directed by Brian Taylor. I love this film. The synopsis of this film is a teenage girl and her little brother try to survive a wild 24 hours, during which a mass hysteria of unknown origins causes parents to turn violently on their own children. And I mean, that it's all right there. I mean, it's great. The film did great. They did a really good job of keeping it PG-13 and interesting, because usually PG-13 horror doesn't really get it for me. It's not enough. You know, it's usually too pandering to the younger audience, but I think they did a really good job in this film of showing enough that it felt graphic, but not showing everything. So it did get that younger rating. They also did a really good job of making it, giving it kind of a dual perspective, I feel. You could look at it from the adult perspective of like the parents' frustrations and everything they're going through and the reasons why they may be like feeling these feelings that they are, like aside from whatever virus or alien, or it's never explained what's making them do this. But you could kind of see like that perspective of kids making you lose your mind. But you can also see in this film, they did a really good job of fleshing out the perspective of the kids and, you know, what they're going through, having to fight the parents and fight the adults and watching their peers die. So it did a really good job of kind of showing all the sides of the situation. They got Dr. Oz, I think it was Dr. Oz they got to be in it, and I thought that was so funny. Everyone did a great job in this film. I think it was beautifully acted. I mean, I can't really say anything negative about this film. It was great. It's a super fun watch, super great for a distraction. It's super playful. It's really funny. The characters have these massive breakdowns in it that are just wonderful to watch. And it's altogether a really good film. So my next film is It Follows, which came out in 2014 by David Robert Mitchell. Michelle? I don't know. And the plot synopsis to this film is, after carefree teenager Jay sleeps with her new boyfriend Hugh for the first time, she learns that she is the latest recipient of a fatal curse that is passed from victim to victim via sexual intercourse. A shape-shifting entity will creep inextricably towards her, taking the form of friends, family, and strangers. Jay's friends don't believe her seemingly paranoid ravings, until they too begin to see the phantom. They band together to help her flee or defend herself. This film I saw in theaters in 2014 when it came out, and I mean, I really like it. This is a favorites list, obviously, so I really like all of these films, but this one really stood out to me. It has a very unique energy, a very interesting vibe to it. It felt so like out of place. Like it's kind of took place in like the 90s, but they had technology that like made it seem like it was later than the 90s, so it was very out of time, very, you know, the society and the world they built in it gave this very distinct feeling of uncanny, you know, that uncanny valley feeling. And the makeup and the effects for the creature, the shapeshifter, are beautiful. I liked all the different types of people they had the being following them be. I liked the ambiguity and the mystery of never quite understanding what it is. They never really explained what it is that's following. They kind of left it open to interpretation. And I thought that was super interesting. It was super cool. And it was really well done. And I picked this to be so high on this list because of the idea of infection and, you know, kind of like this idea of like the disbelief of it. Like, her friends were doubting her at first, and then now they're kind of seeing it towards the end that it's pretty severe. And that just kind of reminded me of like how we've been kind of handling the situation going on, and I thought it was a good one for this list. It was definitely good to rewatch, and it's a great film. I mean, I recommend it. So the next thing I have on my list is The Shining. The Shining came out in 1980 and was directed by Stanley Kubrick. There is another made-for-TV, I think it's just a two-part series adapted from the Stephen King's film The Shining, and that's the one that Stephen King gets behind more. He really likes that one, but for the purposes of this video, I'm gonna go with Stanley Kubrick's film. I really enjoy this one. I think I prefer it out of the two, but the made-for-TV series really does have a merit too, so go check that out in addition. The synopsis for Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is: Jack Torrance becomes winter caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel in Colorado. Hoping to cure his writer block, he settles in along with his wife Wendy, his son Danny, who is plagued by psychic premonitions. As Jack's writing goes nowhere and Danny's visions become more disturbing, Jack discovers the hotel's dark secrets and begins to unravel into a homicidal maniac. So this is a film that most of us have seen at this point in the horror community. It's a pretty well-known film. I mean, I would say that's kind of a joke. It's kind of an understatement. It's a fairly well-known film. And I chose it for this list because of the feeling of isolation that the film evokes, and the idea of being inside and circling around the same halls and just kind of going stir crazy feels super relevant right now. And the film is just a really good expression of like that to its max, of just being inside and being stir crazy and losing your mind. And you know, there are just so many layers to Stanley Kubrick's version. There's so many different angles and places you could read into it, and plot lines you could get out of it, from Native American oppression to sexual abuse themes to just so much you could pull out of this film. So it's a really good, solid watch. It's really, I don't know, it was nice in this time to kind of see people going even crazier than the people around my neighborhood. So my last film is It Comes at Night. This film came out in 2017 by Trey Edward Schultz, directed by Trey Edward Schultz. And the synopsis is: after a mysterious apocalypse leaves the world with few survivors, two families must share one home in an uneasy alliance to keep the evil outside at bay, only to learn that true horror may come from within. So this film fucked me up. I love this film. I loved this film. It was so good. It was so good, guys. Okay, so I need to talk about why it's actually good. So what I really liked about this film, why I decided to include it, is because it's just super relevant to now. It's about a pandemic. It's about a played out pandemic. A pandemic that has collapsed society, that has, you know, gone to completion. There's very few people left. And it's about these two families trying to survive this pandemic, which is, I think at this time, the big fear is that maybe this will go out of control. Maybe this will end society. I don't think it will, but I think that's a big anxiety that a lot of people have right now. So it feels like a super relevant film. And I loved the way it played out. I loved the makeup. I loved the symbolism. Unfortunately, this film was marketed as a creature feature. It's not a creature feature. There's no distinct monster that comes at the end. There's no big reveal of some creature. It's kind of been built up to be that way, but if that's what you're thinking coming in, you're going to be disappointed. It doesn't really touch on that. It touches more on human nature, this film. You know, the monsters are the people, and they're coming from a place of love, but their love turned to fear and their fear turned to hatred, and the characters in this film do something awful, and it ends up being all for nothing. And it's a really relevant narrative for right now, and for being careful of how you let your emotions guide you. You know, the whole film, they think they're being calm and collected and rational, but they're not. They're being antagonizing to each other. They're being accusatory. They're being skeptical of each other. You know, they're calling into question every little thing. Like, I thought you were staying with your brother, not your brother-in-law. Like, they're really nitpicking at each other and trying to, like, almost trying to create a problem where there isn't one. And it ends very badly for these people. It ends with a very gruesome moment. And I think it was so good. It was so relevant to now. It was kind of crazy to watch during all of this, really. This kind of super played out, like, end of a pandemic moment. And I thought it was very good. It had a lot to say, that film did. So, that was my list. Those were my movies. I'm gonna start trying to upload regularly. Comment anything you want me to talk about. I have a few ideas. And thanks for watching.